Daniel Reed counted the cracks in his cell ceiling for the 300th time. They looked like river deltas spreading across concrete, or maybe veins in a dying leaf. He had a lot of time to think about such things now. The military tribunal had taken 6 hours to strip away 20 years of service. 6 hours to decide that saving lives was worth less than following orders. The charges read like a bad joke: insubordination, unauthorized evacuation, destruction of military property. They made it sound like he had betrayed humanity instead of saving 300 colonists from a reactor meltdown. The research facility could be rebuilt. The people he pulled from the flames could not. His commanding officer had been clear during the trial. Resources were allocated for specific purposes. The facility held decades of weapons research. The colonists were expendable compared to that data. Daniel had looked the man in the eyes and asked a simple question: would you have left your daughter there to burn? The silence that followed told him everything. Yes, they would have. That was what separated Daniel from the people who gave orders from comfortable chairs, light years away from the smell of burning flesh. Exile to Redstone had been their compromise. They could have executed him for treason. Instead, they shipped him to the edge of human space to a mining outpost called Last Hope. The name was ironic. Nobody at Last Hope had any hope left. It was where the military sent people they wanted to forget. The transport dropped him at the outpost 3 months after his trial. Last Hope consisted of 14 prefab buildings clustered around a depleted mine shaft. 47 people lived there, each with their own story of failure. Some were criminals. Others were just unlucky. A few, like Daniel, had chosen conscience over career. The outpost manager, a woman named Ruth with a scar running from her eye to her jaw, gave him the basic rundown. Work the supply runs. Keep your head down. Die quietly when your time comes. Nobody leaves Last Hope. Nobody gets pardoned. This was the end of the line. Daniel took a job running supplies between Last Hope and the automated mining drones in the Black Ridge Mountains. It meant days alone in a cargo transport, navigating through storms and rock formations that could tear ships apart. Perfect. He had spent his whole life surrounded by people, following orders, being part of something larger. Now he wanted silence. The other exiles left him alone. They recognized a man who did not want to talk. Ruth gave him a small room in the maintenance building. He spent his evenings reading old books on a cracked tablet and trying not to think about the life he had lost. 6 months passed this way. Wake up, load the transport. Fly into the mountains. Collect ore from the drones, return, sleep, repeat. The routine was numbing, which suited him fine. Pain faded if you stopped paying attention to it. The storm hit during his 47th supply run. Weather on Redstone changed fast. One moment the sky was clear and red. The next it was black with clouds that crackled with green lightning. Daniel tried to outrun it, pushing the transport to maximum speed, but the wind caught him over the deepest part of the Black Ridge Range. The first lightning strike fried his navigation system. The second hit his port engine. The transport started spinning, and Daniel fought the controls as the mountains rushed up to meet him. He managed to level out just before impact, but the landing was still brutal. Metal screamed. Something in his shoulder broke. The windshield cracked and went dark. When he woke up, everything hurt. His shoulder was definitely broken. Maybe some ribs, too. The transport was half buried in snow, tilted at an angle that made moving difficult. Daniel activated his emergency beacon and checked his supplies. Food for 5 days, water for 3. Medical kit. 1 rifle with 2 spare magazines. A portable heater that was already struggling against the cold. He crawled out of the wreckage and immediately realized he was in trouble. This was not any part of the Black Ridge Range he recognized. The valley around him was narrow and deep, walls of black stone rising on both sides. Snow fell steadily. His beacon showed no response. He was too deep in the mountains for the signal to reach Last Hope. Daniel pulled his coat tighter and started walking. Stay with the crashed ship or try to find shelter. Military training said stay put. But military training also said follow orders, and look where that got him. He chose to move. The cave entrance was almost invisible under the snow. He only found it because he was looking for anything that might block the wind. It opened into a larger cavern, and Daniel felt immediate relief from the cold. He fumbled for his flashlight and stepped inside. The cave went back further than his light could reach. The floor was smooth, almost polished. Strange marks covered the walls, symbols he did not recognize. And then his light found them. 3 massive eggs sat in the center of the cavern, each one easily 2 meters tall. Their shells were not smooth but covered in scales that gleamed like metal. Patterns of light pulsed beneath the surface, slow and rhythmic like a heartbeat. They glowed with soft blue and gold colors that filled the entire cave. Daniel approached slowly, his rifle ready. He had seen a lot of alien life in 20 years of military service, but nothing like this. The eggs were warm to the touch despite the freezing cave. He walked around them, looking for any sign of a parent or guardian. What he found instead made his blood run cold. Bones lay scattered near the cave entrance, hidden in the shadows. Huge bones, each one thick as a tree trunk. A skull the size of a small car, elongated and angular with empty eye sockets that seemed to stare at nothing. Scorch marks covered the skeleton. Bullet holes riddled the bones. Someone had killed whatever laid these eggs. Recently too, based on the minimal decay. And those someones had used military-grade weapons to do it. Daniel looked back at the eggs, pulsing with their steady light. Then at his emergency beacon, still showing no response from Last Hope. Then at the storm outside, showing no signs of stopping. He thought about the people he had saved from the reactor fire. He thought about the tribunal that punished him for it. He thought about Ruth's words, "Die quietly when your time comes." He set down his rifle and started gathering materials to make a shelter. The eggs were not his problem. He did not owe them anything. Nobody would blame him for leaving, but Daniel Reed had never been good at doing what made sense. 3 days into his vigil, Daniel realized he had made a terrible decision. His shoulder throbbed with every movement. His food supplies were running low. The storm showed no signs of stopping, and his emergency beacon continued its useless ping into empty space. He should leave, find another cave, try to survive long enough for rescue. Instead, he wrapped another piece of salvaged insulation around the middle egg, which seemed dimmer than the others. The eggs required constant attention. Their internal temperature had to stay within a specific range, or the light patterns would slow and fade. Daniel learned this through trial and error on the first night when the smallest egg nearly went dark. He had pressed his own body against it, sharing his warmth until the glow returned. Now he had a system, the portable heater from his transport, repositioned every few hours to distribute heat evenly. His emergency beacon, stripped for parts and rewired into a secondary heat source. Insulation torn from the crashed ship and arranged around the eggs like a nest. It was crude, but it worked. Daniel studied the walls between tasks. The symbols carved into the stone were unlike anything in the military databases he remembered. Flowing lines connected to geometric patterns. Some sections looked like star charts. Others resembled instruction manuals. One wall showed clear images of creatures with wings and long necks emerging from eggs identical to the ones behind him. Dragons. The word came to him from old Earth mythology. Every human culture had stories about them. Giant reptiles that flew and breathed fire. Gods or monsters depending on who told the tale. But those were just stories. This was real. He found more details about the parent's death while exploring the cave. Shell casings scattered near the entrance, military standard. Burn marks from plasma weapons. Boot prints in the dust, at least 6 different sets. This had been a coordinated kill. Professional hunters with expensive equipment, which meant they would come back for the eggs. Daniel checked his rifle. 2 magazines plus the one loaded. 90 rounds total. Not enough to fight off a professional hunting team, but enough to make them work for it. He started setting up defensive positions using rocks and debris from his transport. The cave had advantages. Single entrance. High walls that limited approach angles. Clear sightlines. He could hold it for a while if he was smart. Maybe long enough for someone to respond to his beacon. On the 5th day, he got his answer. The ship came in low and fast. A sleek black vessel designed for stealth. It landed at the valley entrance and 6 figures emerged wearing combat armor. They moved with military precision, weapons ready, spreading out to cover all angles. Daniel watched from the cave entrance, half hidden behind a boulder. He recognized the armor pattern. Cyrillic design, favored by mercenaries who worked the black market. Expensive gear for expensive prizes. The leader was obvious from body language alone. Taller than the others with armor customized in red and gold. The figure removed their helmet, revealing a Cyrillic face with the characteristic 3 eyes and scaled skin. Male, if Daniel remembered the species correctly. The mercenary looked directly at the cave and smiled. Sharp teeth gleamed in the red light of Redstone's sun. Human. The voice carried clearly across the snow. Universal translator, military grade. You are trespassing on claimed salvage. Leave now and we will forget this encounter. Daniel stayed quiet. Let them make the first move. The eggs belong to us, the mercenary continued. We tracked them for 3 months. We eliminated the Guardian. They are our property by right of conquest. You killed a mother protecting her children, Daniel called back. That is not conquest. That is murder, the Srellick laughed. Philosophy from a human? Your species has been in space for less than a century. Do not lecture us on morality. We have hunted these creatures for 1,000 years. Then you should know they are worth more alive than dead. Indeed, which is why you will step away from them now, or we will take them over your corpse. Daniel raised his rifle and put a round into the snow at the mercenary's feet. Come try. The response was immediate. Plasma fire lit up the cave entrance. Daniel dropped behind his boulder as superheated air scorched over his head. He counted 3 shooters, professional spacing, suppressing fire to pin him down while others flanked. Except there was no flanking position. The cave entrance was the only way in, and Daniel had prepared for this. He triggered his first trap, a simple deadfall made from transport debris. 200 kilos of metal and rock collapsed across the valley approach. One mercenary went down screaming. The others scattered for cover. Daniel used the confusion to relocate to his secondary position. He put 2 rounds into the chest of a mercenary trying to approach from the left. The armor held, but the impact knocked the target down. Not lethal, but out of the fight. You are delaying the inevitable, the Srellick leader shouted. We have supplies for weeks. You have supplies for days. Simple mathematics, human. Daniel did not respond. Let them think about the numbers. Let them wonder what other traps he had prepared. The best defense was making the cost too high. The mercenaries pulled back to their ship. Daniel watched them through the rifle scope. They were regrouping, treating their wounded, probably calling for reinforcements. He had bought himself time. Maybe a day, maybe less. He went back to check on the eggs. The middle one was still dimmer than the others, but holding steady. He placed his hand on its surface and felt the warmth beneath the scales. I do not know if you can hear me, Daniel said quietly. I do not know if you are even conscious in there. But those people out there killed your mother. They want to sell you to collectors who will keep you in cages your whole life. I cannot let that happen. The egg pulsed under his hand, the light pattern shifting slightly. Probably just coincidence. Probably just automatic response to temperature and pressure, but it felt like acknowledgement. Daniel pulled out his tablet and started recording. If he died here, someone should know what happened. He explained about the eggs, about the hunters, about his decision to stay. He uploaded it to his beacon's memory and set it to broadcast on all frequencies. Maybe it would reach someone. Maybe it would matter. The mercenaries returned at dawn the next day. This time they brought drones, small flying weapons platforms that could scout and attack from angles Daniel could not easily defend. Smart, expensive. These people were serious about their prize. Daniel destroyed the first drone with careful shooting. The second one clipped him with plasma fire before he could line up the shot. The pain was immediate and intense, a line of burning across his left arm. He fell back deeper into the cave, breathing hard. The wound was not fatal, but it was bad. The flesh was cauterized, at least. No bleeding, small mercies. Daniel wrapped it in torn cloth and got back into position. You fight well for an exile, the Srellick leader called out. I researched you while we waited. Daniel Reed court-martialed for saving civilians. A hero playing hero again. How noble. Just doing what needs doing, Daniel replied. And what needs doing is dying in a frozen cave for creatures you do not understand. For eggs that will never know you existed? Daniel thought about the tribunal. About the officers who valued data over lives. About being sent to Last Hope to be forgotten. About 300 people who went home to their families because he made a choice. Someone has to stand, he said. Might as well be me. The Srellick was quiet for a long moment. Then, so be it. We will take the eggs tomorrow. You have tonight to make peace with your decisions. The mercenaries withdrew to their ship again. Daniel knew what was coming. They would bring heavier weapons, maybe explosives to collapse the cave entrance and dig out the eggs from above. He had delayed them, but he could not stop them. He sat with his back against the largest egg and ate the last of his food. His arm hurt. His shoulder hurt. Everything hurt. But the eggs were still warm, still glowing, still alive. "Tomorrow is going to be rough," Daniel told them, "but I will be here. I promise." The egg behind him pulsed once, strong and steady, and Daniel Reed, exile and guardian, settled in to wait for dawn. The bombardment started at first light. Not enough to destroy the cave, just enough to keep Daniel pinned and exhausted. Every few hours, plasma fire would light up the entrance, forcing him to take cover. Then silence. Then more fire, classic siege tactics designed to wear him down. Daniel used the quiet periods to reinforce his position. He moved rocks to create better cover. He salvaged more parts from his transport wreckage during a lull, dragging metal plates back to the cave while plasma bolts sizzled past. Every trip was a gamble. Every trip got him one step closer to running out of ammunition. The eggs kept him focused. Their glow had become his clock, his compass, his reason for continuing. The middle egg was growing brighter now, matching the others. Whatever was inside was developing, responding to the warmth he provided. He talked to them during the long hours between attacks, telling them stories about Earth. "Oceans," he said one evening, his good hand resting on the smallest egg. "We have these massive bodies of water that cover most of the planet. Blue and green and always moving. I grew up near one. Used to watch the waves for hours." He paused, remembering. "You probably have something like that wherever you came from. Dragons should get to see oceans." The egg pulsed under his palm, and Daniel smiled despite everything. On the third day, the Srelic leader tried negotiation again. "Human Daniel Reed, let us talk practically. You are injured. You are alone. We have reinforcements arriving within the week. 12 more soldiers with heavy weapons. You cannot win this fight." Daniel did not respond immediately. He was checking his ammunition. 43 rounds left. Not enough for 12 more soldiers. "What do you want?" he finally called back. "We want the eggs intact, preferably without further damage to our personnel. You want to live. These goals are not incompatible. You are asking me to surrender. I am asking you to be reasonable. Walk away. We will drop you at the nearest settlement. You can go back to your exile, and we can complete our salvage operation." "Everyone survives," Daniel laughed, and immediately regretted it as pain shot through his ribs. "You will sell them. Lock them in cages. They will never see sky or fly or know what they are meant to be. They are animals, human. Valuable animals, but animals nonetheless. Your sentimentality is misplaced. Then why do you need them alive? Dead dragons would be easier to transport." Silence. Daniel had hit something true. "The eggs contain genetic material," the Srelic finally said. "Properly incubated, they will imprint on their handler. Dragons were once used as weapons before they vanished. Whoever controls these hatchlings controls the key to recreating that power. Now do you understand the stakes?" Daniel understood perfectly. These were not just rare creatures. They were weapons that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. And he was the only thing standing between them and people who would use them for profit. "My answer is no," Daniel said. The attack that followed was brutal. They brought up heavy plasma cannons and systematically destroyed Daniel's forward positions. He fell back deeper into the cave, using every bit of cover he could find. A near miss collapsed part of the ceiling, showering him with rock and dust. Another shot caught his leg and he went down hard. The pain was extraordinary. His leg was not just burned, but broken. Bone visible through charred flesh. Daniel dragged himself behind the eggs, using them as his final cover. His rifle had 3 rounds left. Maybe 4. He was losing count. "Last chance, human," the Srelic called. "Surrender now or die." Daniel checked his surroundings. The cave walls were covered in those strange symbols. Star charts, instruction manuals, and something else he had missed before. A pattern that repeated throughout the carvings. Circles within circles, connected by lines that pulsed with the same rhythm as the eggs. A communication system. The dragons had a way to call each other. His hand shook as he pulled out his tablet. The battery was nearly dead, but he had enough power for one more transmission. He photographed every symbol on the walls, focusing on the circular patterns. Then he added them to his emergency beacon broadcast along with his previous message. If dragons still existed somewhere in the galaxy, maybe they would recognize their own language. Maybe they would understand that their eggs needed help. It was a desperate hope, but Daniel was fresh out of better options. The mercenaries moved in for their final push. Daniel could hear their boots on stone, their weapons powering up. He raised his rifle with his one good arm and aimed at the cave entrance. "Come on then," he whispered. The first mercenary appeared, and Daniel put a round through their helmet visor. The second one took 2 shots, and Daniel's rifle clicked empty. He threw it aside and pulled his sidearm. 6 rounds in that, then nothing but his hands. Plasma fire filled the cave. Daniel fired back, but his vision was blurring. Blood loss, shock, maybe both. He hit something, heard someone scream, but more kept coming. He was out of ammunition, out of strength, out of time. A plasma bolt caught him in the chest, and Daniel went down. His back hit the largest egg, and he slumped against it. The warmth from the shell was the only comfort in a world of pain. He could feel his heart slowing, could feel the cold creeping in from his extremities. The Srellic leader stood over him, weapon pointed at Daniel's head. "Brave but stupid human. You died for nothing." Daniel looked up at him and smiled through bloody teeth. "No, I bought them time." "That is not nothing." "Time for what?" "No one is coming to save you. No one even knows you are here." "Maybe. But they will hatch knowing someone cared enough to die for them. That matters. You would not understand." The Srellic stared at him for a long moment, then lowered his weapon slightly. "You truly believe that? That your death has meaning simply because you chose it?" "I saved 300 people once," Daniel said. His voice was getting weaker. "Got exiled for it, court-martialed, lost everything. But those people went home to their families. They lived. That mattered more than any medal or rank." He coughed and blood came up. "These eggs are the same. They get to live. That is enough." "You humans are insane," the Srellic said. But something in his tone had changed. Not respect exactly. Maybe recognition of something he did not quite understand. "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "We get that a lot." His vision was fading now. The cave seemed to be getting darker, though the eggs still glowed. Or maybe that was just his eyes failing. He could feel the warmth of the shells behind him, could feel the pulse of whatever lived inside them. Strong and steady and alive. Daniel had one last moment of clarity. He thought about his court-martial, about last hope, about the choices that led him to this cave. He thought about the officers who valued things over people, and how he had never understood that mindset. He thought about 300 colonists whose names he never learned, but whose lives he had saved. And he thought that if he had to die somewhere, protecting something helpless and innocent, this was not the worst way to go. The eggs pulsed beneath his touch, their rhythm matching his failing heartbeat. The glow grew brighter, or maybe he was just imagining it. Colors swirled across his vision, gold and silver and bronze mixing together like sunrise over an ocean. Daniel Reed closed his eyes and felt the warmth one last time. Then he felt nothing at all. The Srellic leader stood over the body for a long moment. Then he turned to his team. "Secure the eggs carefully. This human earned them that much respect." But as they moved forward, the eggs began to crack, and the cave filled with a sound that would echo across the galaxy. The sound started as a low hum that made teeth ache and bones vibrate. Then it rose in pitch until it became something beyond hearing, something felt in the chest and skull and blood. The mercenaries stumbled back, clutching their heads. Their equipment sparked and died. Even the Srellic leader dropped to his knees, 3 eyes wide with something between fear and awe. The eggs were splitting, not breaking or cracking in the way fragile things break. The shells were opening like flowers, scales peeling back in perfect geometric patterns that revealed golden light from within. The heat coming off them was intense enough to melt the snow that had blown into the cave entrance. From the largest egg, a head emerged. Reptilian but elegant, covered in scales that shimmered gold in the dim light. 2 eyes opened, bright as stars, and fixed on Daniel's body slumped against the shell. A long neck followed, then wings folded against a compact body. The creature was small, barely the size of a large dog, but it moved with ancient grace. The second egg opened to reveal silver scales. The third, bronze. 3 hatchlings pulling themselves free of their shells, each one turning immediately to Daniel's corpse. They moved toward him as one, drawn by something beyond instinct. The golden one reached him first. It pressed its snout against Daniel's cooling hand and made a sound like wind through bells. The others joined it, one on each side, their small bodies radiating heat that made the air shimmer. The mercenaries watched in frozen silence. One of them raised a weapon. The Srellic leader grabbed his arm and shook his head. "Wait," he said quietly. "Just wait." The hatchlings were doing something. Their scales began to glow brighter, and that sound returned. The hum that came from nowhere and everywhere. The 3 of them were synchronizing, their breathing and heartbeats matching in perfect rhythm. And then they opened their minds. The Srellic leader gasped and staggered. Every conscious being in 100 meters felt it. A psychic wave that carried images and emotions and raw experience. The hatchlings were accessing Daniel's memories through the residual heat and electrical patterns in his dying neurons. They were learning who he was. They saw his childhood on Earth. Oceans and sunlight and a mother who taught him kindness. They saw his military training, his first combat, the weight of command. They saw the reactor fire and 300 faces illuminated by flames. They saw the trial, the exile, the transport crash. They saw his decision to stay, to protect, to stand against impossible odds, and they understood. In their first moments of consciousness, these ancient creatures learned what it meant to sacrifice yourself for something that could never repay you. The golden hatchling threw back its head and keened. The sound tore through reality like paper, creating ripples in space itself. It was a distress call, a warning song, and a summons all at once, a call that traveled faster than light, crossing dimensions that normal physics did not allow. "Oh no," the Srellic leader whispered. "Oh no, what have we done?" The sky above the valley changed. The red atmosphere of redstone suddenly showed rifts of green fire. Space itself was tearing open in 7 places simultaneously, and through those tears came dragons, not hatchlings, adults. Massive beyond belief, each one easily the size of a starship. Their scales reflected light that had not been seen in known space for 10,000 years. Wings that spanned kilometers unfurled as they emerged from whatever dimension they had been hiding in. 7 ancient dragons appearing in response to the keening of 3 hatchlings. The lead dragon descended first. She was larger than the others, her scales deepest emerald green with edges that glowed like coals. Her eyes held intelligence that made human genius look like infant fumbling. When she landed, the entire valley shook. The mercenaries ran. They did not even try to reach their ship. They simply ran, driven by instinct older than civilization itself. The Srellic leader tried to maintain control, but even he could not fight the primal terror of being in the presence of an apex predator that viewed starships as prey. Only Daniel's body and the 3 hatchlings remained in the cave. The great dragon moved toward them with surprising gentleness. She lowered her head until her snout was level with the hatchlings, and a deep rumbling sound came from her chest. Language, ancient and complex and completely untranslatable by any known technology. The hatchlings responded in kind, their small voices carrying the same harmonics as their elder, and through their connection the great dragon saw everything. She experienced Daniel's last stand through their merged consciousness. She felt his pain, his determination, his final moments of warmth given freely to creatures he did not understand. The dragon called Cinderwing had lived for 30,000 years. She had seen species rise and fall. She had watched stars be born and die. She had forgotten more about the universe than most civilizations would ever learn. But in all that time, in all that experience, she had rarely witnessed true altruism. Most species protected their own. Some protected allies. A few protected those who could repay the debt. But this human had died for creatures that would never know him, never speak his name, never offer anything in return. He had given his life simply because it was the right thing to do. Dragons understood debts. They remembered kindness across millennia, and they never forgot warmth. Cinderwing touched Daniel's body with one massive claw, gentle as a falling leaf. She could feel the last traces of his consciousness, the final electrical patterns fading from his neurons. In another few moments, he would be truly gone. The person who had been Daniel Reed would cease to exist, leaving only cooling meat. But dragons possessed abilities that younger species did not understand. They could manipulate energy at levels so fundamental that physics became more like suggestion than law, and preservation was possible if one was willing to pay the price. Cinderwing looked at the other 6 dragons. They had all witnessed Daniel's sacrifice through the hatchling's call. They all understood what she was considering. Preservation required immense energy. It was a gift usually reserved for dragons alone, for those whose wisdom and experience were too valuable to lose. But this human had earned it. The dragons formed a circle around Daniel's body. Their scales began to glow in perfect synchronization. The hum returned, but different now, deeper, more controlled. They were channeling energy from dimensions where physics worked differently, pulling power from the spaces between spaces. The air crystallized. Literally. Molecules of oxygen and nitrogen arranged themselves into geometric patterns, forming a matrix of pure carbon. Diamond structure, but grown from thought and will rather than pressure and time. The crystal wrapped around Daniel's body, atom by atom, preserving every detail. But preservation of flesh was not enough. Cinderwing reached deeper, into the quantum states of Daniel's dying neurons. She copied the patterns, the connections, the electrical pathways that made up his consciousness. Not perfectly. Perfect was impossible. But enough. Enough to capture the essence of who he had been. The crystal grew to encase Daniel completely. Inside, his body would never decay. His consciousness, encoded in quantum states, would remain intact. Not alive in the traditional sense. Not dead either. Suspended in a state between states where his memories and personality could be accessed by those who knew how. The three hatchlings pressed against the crystal, already understanding what their elders had done. The warmth they felt from Daniel would never fade now. They would carry it with them always. Cinderwing spoke, and her voice made the mountains tremble. Daniel Reed, human guardian, you died as dragons die, protecting the young. You will be remembered as dragons remember. Your warmth will echo through the ages. The hatchlings looked up at her with their bright eyes, and she saw herself reflected there. Dawnfire, the Golden One, Starweaver, silver as moonlight, Ironheart, bronze and brave. They had names now given in the moment of hatching. And they had purpose. You three will carry his memory, Cinderwing told them. You will show the younger races what one human did. You will be his voice when he cannot speak. Do you understand? The hatchlings keened in perfect harmony. They understood. And they accepted. Cinderwing turned her attention to the valley beyond. The mercenary's ship was trying to escape. Futile. She reached out with thought alone, and the ship simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Erased. Removed from the pattern of reality as if it had never been. Justice for the mother dragon they had killed. Justice for Daniel's wounds. Dragons did not forgive those who harmed the young. The 7 great dragons prepared to depart. They would return to their hidden places, to the dimensions where they waited and watched. But they would remember this day. They would remember the human who stood alone, and the 3 hatchlings would remain. They would grow. They would learn, and they would make certain that Daniel Reed's sacrifice meant something. Cinderwing took one last look at the crystal containing Daniel's preserved form. Sleep well, little guardian, she said. Your watch is ended. Ours is beginning. News of what happened in the Black Ridge Valley spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. The survivor, a junior mercenary who had fled far enough to avoid immediate erasure, sold his story to every news network that would pay. Dragons were real. Dragons were back, and they had killed an entire hunting team to protect their young. Humanity heard a different story. They learned that one of their own, an exiled soldier named Daniel Reed, had died defending dragon eggs from poachers. The military tried to suppress the details. They did not want anyone asking why a decorated hero had been court-martialed and sent to die on a frozen rock. But the story got out anyway. Ruth from Last Hope sold Daniel's emergency beacon recordings to a journalist. The entire galaxy watched a dying human explain why he chose to protect creatures he did not understand. They heard him talking to the eggs, sharing stories about Earth's oceans. They heard his last words before the final battle. Public opinion shifted overnight. Humans went from being tolerated newcomers to being the species that stood on principle, even when it cost everything. Other species watching the recordings began to understand what made humans dangerous. Not their weapons or their ships, but their absolute refusal to abandon those who needed help. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The return of dragons changed everything. If they were back, if they were watching, then old treaties and old assumptions no longer applied. The Council needed to respond, needed to establish communication, needed to prevent another incident. Cinderwing made the decision easy. She appeared above the council station with the other 6 great dragons, their presence alone a statement of power. Through careful translation and psychic projection, she delivered a simple message. We have watched the younger species for 10,000 years. We withdrew because you were not ready for us. You saw us as weapons or trophies or threats. You could not understand partnership. But one of your kind, one human, showed us that perhaps times have changed. She showed them Daniel's last stand, made them experience it through dragon memory, perfect and complete. Every council member felt his pain, his determination, his choice to die for creatures that could not repay him. They felt what the hatchlings felt. They understood what Cinderwing understood. Daniel Reed earned dragon gratitude, she continued. His species, by extension, has earned dragon respect. We will emerge from hiding. We will communicate with the younger races again, but we will remember warmth and we will remember coldness. Act accordingly. The council session that followed lasted 3 days. Every species had opinions about what Dragon's return meant for galactic politics. But they all agreed on one thing. Humanity deserved recognition for producing someone like Daniel Reed. The vote came on the 4th day. Humanity would receive a permanent seat on the Galactic Council, not because of their military might or their economic power, but because one human died proving that his species valued compassion over calculation. Some council members objected. Humans were too young, too inexperienced, too reckless. But Cinderwing's presence made the debate academic. Dragons approved. Dragons remembered. Dragons had chosen. On Redstone, the valley where Daniel died became a monument. Workers from a dozen species volunteered their time to transform the site. They carved steps into the cliff faces. They built platforms for visitors. They preserved the cave exactly as it had been, Daniel's crystal form still resting against the place where the eggs had hatched. The statue came later, a representation of Daniel in his last moments, carved from a special stone that dragons had blessed with their fire. It radiated gentle heat even in the coldest winters. Visitors would come and place their hands on it, feeling the warmth, understanding the sacrifice. But the greatest monument was not built by hands. It was the 3 hatchlings themselves. Dawnfire, Starweaver, and Ironheart grew rapidly. Within a year, they were the size of large ships. Within 5 years, they rivaled their elders. But unlike other dragons who withdrew from younger species, these 3 remained active. They became ambassadors, mediators, and teachers. Dawnfire specialized in conflict resolution. She would appear during wars and disputes. Her presence alone often enough to make both sides reconsider their positions. When asked why she cared about the conflicts of younger species, she would share Daniel's memory. Show them what one person sacrificed to protect life. Few could continue fighting after experiencing that. Starweaver focused on education. She traveled between worlds, teaching about dragon history and culture. But more importantly, she taught about sacrifice and compassion. She showed young people of every species that strength meant protecting the weak, not exploiting them. Ironheart became a guardian. She stationed herself near frontier colonies, the ones most vulnerable to pirates and raiders. Her presence deterred most attacks. The ones that came anyway learned that dragon justice was swift and absolute. She wore a crystal around her neck, a shard of Daniel's memory stone, and she never forgot why she protected the helpless. Each dragon carried a piece of Daniel with them. Through the quantum encoding in the crystal matrix, they could access his memories, his personality, his perspective. They could ask him questions and receive answers built from his preserved consciousness. He was not alive, not truly, but he was not entirely gone either. And in the dragon collective consciousness, where all dragons connected through dimensions beyond normal space, Daniel Reed existed as a permanent presence. Dragons visiting that mental space could experience his sacrifice firsthand. Young dragons learned about warmth by feeling what Daniel felt in his final moments. 20 years after the hatching, the Galactic Council held a ceremony at the Valley Monument. Representatives from every major species attended. Humans came by the thousands, wanting to honor one of their own. But the place of pride was reserved for 3 massive dragons who landed with surprising gentleness. The ceremony was simple. Names were read of others who had died protecting those weaker than themselves. Acts of courage were recognized. And Cinderwing, now ancient even by dragon standards, gave a speech that would be remembered for generations. Bravery is common, she said. Every species produces soldiers and warriors and heroes. But compassion without expectation of reward is rare. Daniel Reed died protecting creatures he did not understand, who could never thank him, who could never repay the debt. He died because it was right, not because it was smart. She paused, her massive form somehow projecting gentleness. That is what dragons value. That is what we remember, and that is why humanity earned our respect. One person dying alone changed how we see your entire species. Dawnfire stepped forward, dwarfing the assembled delegates. My siblings and I would not exist without his sacrifice. We would have died in our eggs or been sold to collectors. Daniel Reed gave us life, freedom, and purpose. We spend our lives trying to be worthy of that gift. She touched the crystal pendant around her neck. Inside it, quantum patterns pulsed with the echo of human consciousness. He is still with us. Every dragon carries his memory. Every young dragon learns his story. In our way, we made him immortal. The human delegation wept. Even species that did not cry felt the weight of the moment. One exile, dying in a frozen cave, had become the bridge between humanity and the oldest species in the galaxy. Ruth was there, ancient now but still sharp-eyed. She spoke briefly about the man she had known at Last Hope. He never complained, she said. Never asked for pardon or recognition. He just did the work and tried to be decent. That was Daniel. Simple and good. As the ceremony concluded, Cinderwing made one final announcement. The Galactic Council has granted humanity a permanent seat. We dragons sponsored this action. But understand that we did not do this because humanity is perfect. We did this because you produced Daniel Reed, and that potential exists in all of you. She looked directly at the human delegation. Other species will test you. They will doubt your wisdom and question your choices. When that happens, remember the man who died in the snow. Remember that your greatest strength is not violence, but compassion. That is what Daniel taught us. That is what dragons will remember. The ceremony ended, but people stayed. They walked through the preserved cave. They touched the warm statue. They stood before Daniel's crystal form and tried to understand what drove a man to die for something that could never thank him. And in the dragon consciousness, in the quantum space where thought and memory intertwined, Daniel Reed experienced it all. He felt the warmth of gratitude from 3 dragons he had saved. He felt the respect from species across the galaxy. He felt the pride from fellow humans who finally understood what he had done. He was not alive. But he was not gone. And in a very real way, he had become exactly what Cinderwing promised. A legend, an example, a permanent reminder that sometimes the right thing to do is also the hardest thing to do. And dragons who remembered everything would make certain that lesson was never forgotten. Lieutenant Sarah Kim sat at her post on the frontier station, watching sensors flicker across multiple screens. Another boring night shift at the edge of explored space. She had joined the military hoping for adventure and found mostly routine. Supply manifests, equipment checks, endless reports that nobody read. A contact appeared on the outer perimeter. Large, moving with purpose. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She activated the station's defense grid and opened communication channels. Unknown vessel, identify yourself or be fired upon. The response came not through radio but through her mind. Not invasive, just a gentle presence that made words unnecessary. She knew immediately what approached. Dragon. The defense grid powered down automatically. Standard protocols now. 20 years after the hatching. You did not threaten dragons. You welcomed them and hoped they were in a good mood. Sarah watched as a massive bronze form descended toward the station. Ironheart. She knew the dragon from pictures and stories, though seeing her in person was different. The scales caught starlight and reflected it in patterns that seemed almost alive. Wings that could have wrapped around the entire station folded with surprising grace. The dragon's presence filled the communication channels. Lieutenant Kim, I request permission to dock. Sarah checked her protocols. Nothing about how to handle a dragon requesting to dock. She made a command decision. Granted. Bay 7 is our largest. Will that work? More than adequate. Thank you for your courtesy. The entire station watched as Ironheart maneuvered into the bay. Her movements were careful, precise, avoiding any contact with the fragile human structures. When she settled, her massive head barely fit through the bay entrance. Sarah met her at the airlock, trying not to show how nervous she felt. Dragons were allies now, but they were still apex predators with the power to dismantle ships with thought alone. Ironheart's eyes were surprisingly kind. You do not need to fear. I came seeking assistance, not conflict. What can we help with? The dragon shifted, and Sarah noticed the crystal pendant around her neck. She had heard about those. Pieces of Daniel Reed's preserved consciousness, carried by the 3 hatchlings he died protecting. There is a settlement 3 systems from here, Ironheart said. Mining colony. Recent pirate activity. The colonists sent distress calls, but no one has responded. I've been tracking the raiders, but I wanted human perspective before acting. Sarah pulled up the reports. Sure enough, a colony called New Start had been reporting attacks for 3 weeks. Standard procedure would take another month to get security forces out there. By then, people would be dead or enslaved. Why do you need our perspective? Sarah asked. Ironheart's mental presence conveyed something like sadness. Because Daniel taught me that every life matters. The Raiders are sentient beings too. If I simply eliminate them, I become what humans would call an executioner. I wanted to offer them a chance to surrender first. Sarah felt her throat tighten. Here was a creature that could crack planets asking permission to show mercy. That is very human of you. It is very Daniel of me, Ironheart corrected gently. I carry his memories. When I face difficult choices, I ask what he would do, and he would offer surrender first, even to people who did not deserve it. They worked out a plan. Sarah would accompany Ironheart to the colony. The dragon's presence would deter the raiders, but Sarah would handle communication. Human to human. Give them a chance to stand down before dragon justice became necessary. The trip took 6 hours. Sarah spent most of it in the small observation bay Ironheart had arranged on her back. The dragon had learned to create comfortable spaces for humans who traveled with her. Temperature control, oxygen supply, even acceleration dampeners. Sarah used the time to study the crystal pendant through the transparent floor. It pulsed with soft light, rhythmic like a heartbeat. Inside, quantum patterns preserved the consciousness of a man who died before Sarah was born. "Can he hear us?" she asked. Ironheart's mental voice was warm. "In a way. His awareness exists in the quantum space where all dragons connect. He experiences what we experience. If you wish to speak to him, I can facilitate that." Sarah considered. What would I even say? Whatever you feel is appropriate. He was human once. He understands human thoughts. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to imagine speaking to a preserved consciousness. "Daniel Reed, you do not know me, but I know you. Everyone knows you. They teach your story in military academy now. Required reading. How to make ethical decisions under pressure." She paused, feeling foolish. "I guess I wanted to say thank you for showing us what it means to stand for something." The crystal's pulsing changed rhythm slightly. Sarah felt something. Not words, but emotion. Gratitude, recognition, a sense of continuing purpose. Ironheart's voice was gentle. "He acknowledges you, and he is proud that his example continues to guide your people." New Start Colony came into view. Small dome structures clustered on an asteroid rich with rare minerals. 3 ships orbited nearby, clearly not belonging to the miners. Pirate vessels, well-armed and aggressive in design. Ironheart opened a wideband communication channel. "Attention, Raiders. This is Ironheart. You have 30 seconds to power down weapons and prepare for inspection. Refuse, and I will remove you from existence." The response was immediate. Weapons charging, engines firing up for escape. They were going to run. Sarah activated her communication link. "Wait, listen to me. I am Lieutenant Kim, Terran Defense Corps. That dragon you are about to fire on, she is giving you a chance you do not deserve, a chance most predators would not offer. Stand down now, face trial for your crimes, and you might live. Keep fighting, and you become dust." Silence. Sarah could imagine the calculations happening on those ships. Fight a dragon and die. Run and die slower. Or surrender and maybe see tomorrow. One ship powered down. Then another. The third tried to run, engines screaming as it burned for the edge of the system. Ironheart moved. Not aggressively, just quickly. She appeared in the fleeing ship's path, her massive form blocking their escape. The ship tried to alter course, too late. It collided with her scales and simply bounced off, engines dead from the impact. "Surrender accepted," Ironheart said calmly. "Colonial security forces will arrive within 20 hours to take custody. Until then, you will wait here. Any attempt to leave will be final." The miners emerged from their domes as Ironheart landed. They looked at the dragon with awe and fear and gratitude all mixed together. One old miner approached slowly, removing his helmet. "Thank you," he said simply. "We thought nobody was coming." Ironheart lowered her head to his level. "Someone always comes. That is what Daniel taught us. Someone always stands when standing is needed." The old miner squinted at the crystal pendant. "Is that really him? The guy from the stories?" "A piece of him. Enough to guide me. Enough to remember why protection matters. Well, you tell him thanks from us. Tell him what he did still matters." Sarah watched the exchange and understood something fundamental. Daniel Reed had not just saved 3 eggs in a frozen cave. He had changed how an entire ancient species viewed the universe, and through them he had changed how the galaxy viewed humanity. That night, as Ironheart carried Sarah back to the station, The dragon shared something from Daniel's preserved consciousness. A memory. His last moments in the cave, body broken but mind clear, choosing to stay despite knowing he would die. Sarah experienced it directly. Felt his pain, his determination, his simple certainty that this was right. Felt his hands on the eggs, sharing his warmth. Felt his final thought before darkness took him. Not regret, not fear, just quiet satisfaction that he had done what needed doing. When the memory ended, Sarah found herself crying. How do you bear it? Carrying that with you always? It is a gift, Ironheart replied. Not a burden. His sacrifice gave me life. His memory gives me purpose. Every time I protect someone weak, every time I offer mercy to those who do not deserve it, I honor what he did. That is not a burden. That is meaning. Sarah returned to her station different than when she left. She filed her report, noting everything that happened. But she also added a personal log entry. Today I met a dragon who carries a piece of a dead hero. The dragon asked my permission to show mercy because a human taught her that every life matters. I watched that dragon stop raiders and spare their lives. I felt that human's last thoughts, and they were not about himself. They were about warmth and protection and doing what was right. They say Daniel Reed died alone, but he did not. He died with purpose. And that purpose continues through creatures that will outlive our entire species. He became something more than human. He became an ideal. And dragons who forget nothing made certain that ideal would never die. I understand now why we have a council seat, why other species respect us despite our youth. It is not about power or politics. It is because we produced someone who showed the galaxy what true sacrifice looks like. One exile, one cave, one choice. That was enough to change everything. I hope I can be half as brave if my moment comes. Across the galaxy, thousands of similar stories played out. Dragons appearing to help, dragons teaching about compassion, dragons sharing Daniel's memory with anyone willing to listen, and slowly, gradually, the younger races began to understand. Strength was not about domination. It was about protection. Honor was not about victory. It was about doing right when doing right cost everything. And humanity, for all their flaws and foolishness, had shown the oldest species in the galaxy that sometimes the youngest voices spoke the truest wisdom. In the dragon consciousness, in the space between spaces where quantum thought existed beyond death, Daniel Reed experienced all of it. Every life saved because Ironheart intervened. Every conflict resolved because Dawnfire shared his memory. Every student who learned his story and chose compassion over cruelty. He was dead, his body preserved in crystal in a cave on Redstone, but his impact rippled outward like light from an ancient star. Dragons never forgot warmth, and they made certain the galaxy never forgot the human who showed them what warmth truly meant. Daniel Reed, Exile and Guardian, had become legend, not through power or conquest, but through the simple act of standing when no one else would, of protecting the helpless because it was right, of dying alone so others could live, and in the end that was enough. More than enough. That was everything.